Just to let folks know, my name's Joe Deegan. I'm the moderator for this session. This is J2. If you hear a knocking, that's probably my computer clicking to let people in the room. So nobody's knocking on our door here. This session is H1, Social Work Ethics and Technology, and it's presented by Robin Durham. Robin is with us, but this is a recording for 45 minutes, and then we'll do a round robin discussion at the end of the tape. So go ahead and roll.
Hello, welcome to Ethics and Technology, Avoiding Missteps with Technology. My name is Robin Durham, and I'm an assistant professor with the Concord University MSW program. And so I'll be talking to you today about some of the ethical considerations in using technology. The plan with this is to talk a bit about it, and then the last few minutes of the training, I'll join you so that we can kind of have an open discussion versus me presenting some scenarios. So we do want to become familiar with the changes to the code. I know it's been a couple of years now. We've certainly seen things evolve, but even in the past few years, we've seen an evolution. So going from in-person, face-to-face services to the online stuff through video, talking by phone to sending text messages, and the old-fashioned typing and writing to doing emails. And I'm not being critical and saying that these are bad things, but they do come with challenges. Even something I didn't include here, but just like faxing information, probably everybody in this training has received a fax that was not meant for you. It came to the wrong place. So again, there's issues with lots of, anytime we add technology, there's always going to be some bumps in the road and things we need to think about. So, we do know that technology can be very powerful, but there can be some real issues as well. Information can certainly be stolen. There's some examples I want to show you later where that has happened. We think about, through phishing emails and through hacking and things like that. The website's providing information, and we think about this with our clients, but we need to be thinking about this for ourselves as well. That information is not always reliable, and how do we determine what's reliable? People can misrepresent themselves, and I guess this is one of my concerns about the online stuff. And I'm not saying it's the companies are bad, but as we'll talk about more later, there are some jurisdiction issues and who can provide what. So how are people representing themselves, and do clients know what those credentials mean? Confidentiality, with not just with hacking, but for those of you who are providing services, it's how do you know who's in the room or who's within earshot of your client? Where are you providing the services and who's within earshot? So there's lots of issues with that. Like I mentioned, jurisdiction issues, and we'll talk about that later. Liability and malpractice when we talk about state and, for some people, national boundaries. Because prior to all this electronic stuff, you provided services physically in a location. With technology, there is the ability to provide services with no geographic boundaries to it. The digital divides. So everybody has a different level of knowledge and competency, and that includes our clients as well. And there can be some really unrealistic expectations about technology and what it can and cannot do. But also, and let me just tell you, I'm very biased. So, but I think we miss a lot when we're doing this electronically. We're seeing just a part of the person, and it's just very different. So when we think about how easy is it for the professional relationship to get blurred? Those of you that are doing services might notice that you've got clients that normally, if they came to your office, they would be dressed, and now they're sitting in front of the computer in much more casual clothing, and maybe you are too. But it can seem a little bit more like it's meant to be a friendship, and there's not the clear professional roles that should be happening. So in thinking about some of the ethical principles that we need to think about in use of not just social media, but also in just providing telehealth services, we talk about confidentiality and multiple or slash dual relationships. People, providing testimonials, which we'll talk about later, use of informed consent, how to really minimize intrusions on privacy, and part of that is we need to know where that's coming from. These professional relationships and what that and how we start them and how we maintain those, and then documentation and then maintaining those records. So when we think about the code of ethics, we all know that there's been a change. It changed in 2017 and took effect in January of 2018. And this again was the most substantial revision to the Code of Ethics since 1996. And again, those of you that have been around for a long time remember that that was a huge revision. Since then, there have been some minor revisions in 1999, I think 2008. There may be another one I'm forgetting, where there was some language and updates that way. So as you see, I've tried to put links directly under some of this stuff so that you have easy access to it as well. And under this one, I have the regular Code of Ethics, but also there's a Code of Ethics with the highlighted changes, which makes it really easy to see what was made different. We all talk about, well, I shouldn't say well, but many times people will talk about how the Code of Ethics is not specific enough. It's vague. It's not cut and dry. And to some degree that is true, but we have to remember, unlike some of our sister or brother professions like psychology and counseling, they only license at the master's level and for very specific types of work. We license from the bachelor's level on up, but also so many settings can fall under social work. So there has to be some ability for us to make some decisions based on the context of practice. Something I'll talk more about is that NASW, ASWB, CSWE, and CSWA release standards in ethics, technology, and social work practice. And this is a really nice companion to the Code of Ethics. It gives you some specifics in terms of examples and discussions about using technology. Certainly as I'm talking about this, I mean, if you have Code of Ethics with you, that's fine. If not, you can always access it later. But here's a quick shot of the sections that got revised. As you can see, a lot of it was under our commitment to clients, and then also under
I think we lost the audio again.
And I think it just froze. Yep. Under commitment to colleagues. So that you can go to those sections and see exactly. And the highlighted one will have that marked very clearly for you. So when we think about the purpose of the code, first of all, it's to unify the profession. So we all come from different backgrounds and values and things like that. So it's kind of meant to do that. So, but when we think about how technology has grown and will continue to grow, that's the thing, it will continue to get change. We have to kind of look ahead to how does this impact what we're doing. So things like, again, maintaining confidentiality, like I said, boundaries, consent, competence, ethical stuff. So we have to always be taking all that into consideration. When we think about now with this revision, we're talking about the Code of Ethics is about interactions and relationships, whether they're in person, in the same room, or through the use of technology and whatever that looks like. So I'm not going to read this through, but it does talk about, when it talks about the code, what technology assisted social work includes. And I think as you look at that, they've tried to cover the devices that could be used, and that it really can have to do with all levels of social work practice. Because many times, and I think a lot of our, when I'm talking with students, when they hear like the technology stuff, they immediately assume, well, that's therapy. Well, no, there's lots of services being provided via technology. So it's not just therapy. I know for me, certainly, the program I work in is a 100% online program, but also I provide social work or clinical supervision. And with COVID now doing that electronically. So it means a lot of things. So we have to keep, not that we have to become, technology experts, but we have to, just like other areas, stay on top of how technology is changing and what does that mean for what we do every day. So this next slide talked, and I've got the links for you in it as well to talk a little bit about some of the guidelines and laws that you might want to consider. And I'm not saying that this is everything, but it's a start. So when we think nationally, the Association for Marital and Family Therapy, the APA, NASW, all have guidelines on the use of technology and telehealth, that sort of thing. Under the federal piece, I put links to HHS and HIPAA and how that applies to what we're doing and changes. Now, one of the things I want to caution you about, HIPAA relaxed some of the guidelines because of COVID. What we have to be aware of is understanding that these may change back once COVID is, under control and life gets more back to normal. So just be aware that what I'm telling you today may not be true in 6 months. So be kind of aware of what you need to look at with HIPAA and the changes there. So in talking about state guidelines, certainly the Board of Social Work, the Board of Examiners in Psychology and Counseling have all listed their takes on technology. So if you are a person who's duly licensed, then you need to look at both. And I'm not giving you legal advice here, but generally it's better to follow the more stringent guideline if you are duly licensed. Also, I've got a link for West Virginia Code in state law because there is actually a reference to telehealth under that as well. Something else that you can access is NASW's Assurance Services, which is their malpractice insurance. They have a nice link I kind of fell across here. And what it does under each of these tabs, there's like a question answer thing. And it is kind of neat because you may find that, yeah, this is a question I had, and you can go right to it and it gives you some feedback on things to think about. So that link is in there for you as well. In talking about the standards in technology and social work practice, one of the things here is, again, these 4 organizations basically collaborated to come up with some standards to give us some guidance. Because again, the Code of Ethics talks about, technology, but not in specific ways. So one of the things that you can certainly access the whole document with this link, and I'm going to talk about pieces of it as we go through the training here. So there's these 4 main sections that they're talking about, and under each section they've got standards that are a bit more specific. So are the information we provide to the public, how services are delivered and designed, how information is managed, whether it be gathering and storage and access, and education and supervision. So under the first section, it's ethics and values and representation of self and accuracy. And so in looking at this, some of it may seem like it's a no-brainer, but it's, again, things to think about. So when we are using technology that, and whatever that means, so whether we have websites and things like that, we need to make sure that the information that we put out there is accurate. So basically, we can't just post something that we like. I mean, we want to take our time because, again, there's a difference between professional self and personal self. So when we're putting any kind of information up there, it needs to be up to date. It needs to be reliable. It needs to be from a really solid source. Because, again, we're representing ourselves that way. And in extension, we're representing the profession. So we should put information out there. So that means we have to do our homework. We have to make sure, okay, I've got this website. Let me make sure what this website is. This was interesting out of a source I used, but basically it says we should stick to our professional standards and realize that people are always trackable. Um, when people do a lot of things anonymously, I know they can start different accounts and Facebook, and it's talking about blogs and message and Twitter, but somebody can find out who that is. Now, I'm pretty technology stupid, so I don't know how to do that. But let's say, for example, um, you know, for some reason a client makes a complaint, there are folks who their job is to go and find, who owned that account, or was that really a true account, that sort of thing. So these things can be part of legal actions, basically. And also, there are people out there who are very skilled and very talented and know how to figure out whose account is what and how to get into those things. Um, so, we do have to be very careful with what we're doing. Um, so we're not safe just because we don't put our real name out there or something like that. Okay. The same thing holds true later on. I think I've got a slide where I talk about doing searches on clients, and this is kind of where this comes to play too. You might say, well, I didn't go on their site or leave a comment. I just looked. Well, somebody that's skilled in technology can look at that stuff, and so by extension, they can say, well, gosh, that person works for this mental health agency. Why were they looking at Mrs. Jones's site? And so in a way, it can break some confidentiality. When we think about how we represent ourselves, again, that we are what we post, we have to go back and make sure it's accurate. When we are saying we are certified or whatever to do something, we have to make sure we can back that up. We have to make sure that if something changes, that we update the information that's out there, basically. So it doesn't mean you have to be perfect, but it means you really make an effort to keep what you are advertising or posting as up to date and accurate. So the second section, as you can see here, goes through a whole lot about service delivery. I'm not going to read all these; they're right in front of me. You got it. But there's everything from delivering services to social media stuff, boundaries. So you've got all of that in there. So I picked a couple of these to talk about. So when we think about using technology to deliver the services that we are, we have to follow the code of ethics, just like if you were providing it to the person in the same room. So, we want to, when we talk about, what are the risks and benefits of providing services using technology? And, an example it talks about here is if you're seeing people in office and you have a client who is having some suicidal ideation, that's going to be one thing, but you may have a client who you're meeting with the telehealth stuff or just using technology, and they're expressing that they're having suicidal ideation. So how do we deal with that? How do we, unlike when they're in person in our office, if they're out there on technology, how do we know where they are? Because they may be using a home desktop computer, or they may be using their phone, which means they could literally be anywhere. So how, we have to think about crisis and what that looks like. When we think about, that things are kept confidential. So we need to think about, and if you work for a big agency, I mean, you have to, may not fall on you so much, but you still have to know what that is again, who has access to that information and how can they access that information? Again, the boundary stuff. And it's saying here, we should be mindful of boundary confusion that may result if you disclose personal information. We say, but I don't say anything. Well, if you're providing, so here's why I would go back to, where are you providing the services from? If you're providing them from a dedicated office, that's one thing, but what if you're providing services out of your home, and what can the client tell about you from what they can see? What's behind you, in your surroundings, but also what information are we putting out there? And that's again, information clients can gather for and make whatever judgments. This one too is, confirming the identity of the client that we're providing services to. Now, if you've never met the person before, that could be an issue. How do you do that? Are you going to have them, hold up their driver's license or something with it? How are you going to do that? When we're talking about things where we can't see them visually, so you're on a phone call, or there's being something that's been filled out and sent back. How do we know who's doing that? So some people are using like passwords, passcodes, or an image that is a way of confirming who the client is. When you think about situations of domestic violence or non-custodial parent issues, and this can happen when we're doing services in the office. Someone could call and say, hey, I'm Johnny Smith's mom, and maybe I'm not. So how do we do that? And again, some agencies have said, okay, you have to get, what's the passcode for this account? And they have to give that before things proceed. So we may have to think about that with the online services that we're doing. What we have to think about when we're providing services, we have to continue to abide by licensure and scope of practice and things like that. And here's the interesting thing, and this is where some people are getting tripped up. Just because we can do online services doesn't mean you can provide services anywhere. Most places have, for example, West Virginia. If being licensed in West Virginia, I can provide services to clients in West Virginia. Most other places are that way too. So when we think about electronic practice, it's seen as taking place both where the person is receiving services and the person is providing the services. So if I have a client, then this goes back to verifying. So a client logs in for a telehealth service, and they don't necessarily tell me right off the bat that they're in South Carolina on vacation. I'm not supposed to be providing services there. So here's a couple examples. So, you and the client are initially working in one area, and this is, we certainly run it, and I put college because we run into this here at Concord in our counseling center. While students are here, they're getting services on campus. Now, it's summertime or there's a semester break and the person goes home. And let's say they go home to Virginia. I can't automatically provide services in Virginia. And the thing, we could say is, well, but they were my client in West Virginia. I would have to contact Virginia, their board of social work or board of whoever manages that, and ask for permission. And if they could tell me no, or they could tell me yes, but you can only see your established clients. You can't see new clients. So there can be some issues there. I kind of wonder, and I haven't checked this out. So if we have our discussion at the end, I'd love your all's feedback, how people that are contracting and working for these companies are getting around that. Because again, you're supposed to practice in the jurisdiction that you are licensed. Now, maybe the companies have made agreements. I don't know, but if I was going to do that kind of service, I would want to make sure I don't want to be in violation of my licensure. But also, let's talk about the opposite. You decide to do some traveling for a couple of weeks, but you want to keep in touch with some of your clients. Well, again, if you're in Nevada, you would have to get permission from Nevada to provide sessions or services to your clients back in West Virginia. So just don't assume that just because we have the technology that means we're unlimited in what we can do. I can't speak for psychology and counseling, but in social work, we don't have automatic reciprocity where, we have one licensure and it's across the US. We just don't have that. I don't know that it would come to that because, states certainly want their own autonomy in creating their regulations. If we think about under the West Virginia Code, and I had this listed as well, and again, it's unlawful to practice or offer social work in this state without a license or permit issued by the state. So people aren't supposed to be providing services to clients in West Virginia if they're not licensed in West Virginia or if they are not granted permission to do that. Okay. So when we think about informed consent, so talking about the use of technologies and, again, the risks and benefits. And so we think about what are some possible benefits, and there's several of them listed here. Okay, and they're like it's all good. And there might be some other ones that you can come up with which are fine, but then let's talk about what are some of the risks of doing that. And technology, because we know it happens. Technology sometimes just quits. Do we have policies in place as if we lose connection, who does what? Does the client dial back in? Not dial back in. Boy, that's old, isn't it? Do they reconnect to the site? Do you contact them? How are confidentiality breaches dealt with, and how do we minimize the possibility of that? Like, for example, let's say I've got my phone, the client's using a phone, and I might say, okay, take your phone and scan the room and show me that nobody's there. Well, that's great, but how do I know that it's going to stay that way? That we don't unauthorized use, that somebody doesn't have access, and just cost, because some folks don't have devices that'll do this. There's lots of areas, and we know this in our rural state, where internet access is awful. It's not reliable. And for some people, they're having, if they're going to access it, they're going to have to be in a public spot to do that. Well, then that's not going to be the most appropriate place for them to receive services, because we need to ensure privacy. The other thing that we need to think about, I think, is the client-specific stuff. Those of you who have done therapy, you've worked with clients, I'm very sure, who have anxiety, panic, who don't want to go out in public. Well, whereas technology can be wonderful, it can reach them where they are, but we got to be careful. Are we then making it easier for them to stay cooped up and not getting out of the house? And there can be other issues with that as well. Here's something I just wanted you came across, and I just updated this. And this is just a couple, but there's been breaches as of 2020. And again, this big Medicaid organization in Oregon, a person's laptop was stolen, and had names, contact, dates of birth, Medicaid ID numbers. Magellan Health, there was a breach where a ransomware hit, and basically, again, employee credentials, passwords, W-2, insurance account information, treatment information. That's just a nightmare. And this benefit recovery specialist, which is a billing company. And you can see, again, names, dates of birth, diagnosis codes. So we have to be very, very cautious of how we're maintaining the information, protecting that with our clients. The professional boundaries, which again, we always have to be mindful of in rural areas anyway, but we again need to think about, sometimes with technology, it can feel a little more loosey-goosey, and that's not a good thing. So we have to make sure that we're, prevent client access to our personal social networking sites. We need to be careful. And a lot of people say, well, you know what, when I'm off the clock, I should be able to be who I am. Well, that's true. But, unfortunately, we're never completely off the clock. I mean, even if we're not working, we're still under the scrutiny of the places we live. So looking at, how do we protect our, Facebook accounts or my Pinterest account, things like that. Again, we have the right to freedom of speech, but how is our personal communication perceived, and how does that affect professional relationships? We really don't stop representing the profession. That's, again, we just don't. So, an example might be is, when I'm seeing my client face to face, I'm just very supportive and understanding and professional about substance use issues and things like that. But then I'm posting really inappropriate things on my social media, and people see that. And so it becomes, okay, so which one are you? Which, you're pretending to be one thing and then doing another. It's a good idea. If your agency doesn't have a social media policy, you might want to talk to them about it. Or if you're running your own agency, you may want to look into this as well. that we should develop social media policies that we talk to clients about, our site, our professional use of certain things, what's shared, what's not, how we would handle, like if a client does contact you on your social media, things like that, but also about how they can, what they need to behave, how their behavior needs to be, because this is not a bad thing, but a lot of people have, company Facebook accounts, and do we want clients leaving comments on there that now identify them as clients? So there's something, things we need to think about. Now, once we talk to a client about things and we talk about the whys and all that, I mean, we can't stop it from happening, but we need to make sure we've had that conversation with them. So here was just an example, to look at. This is just kind of a start, basically. And it's, I like where it says, again, I believe that adding people, it can compromise your confidentiality and privacy. It can blur boundaries, things like that. It says you're welcome to like my professional page. No one except me is able to see who likes my page. Now that has to be with how you have it set up. So anything. I don't accept friend requests. So that's just kind of out there. There's another couple of things. There's one by this Dr. Keely Combs that's out there. And also the University of Buffalo School of Social Work has, a guide to social media. It's kind of cool. It's very interactive. You type on the category and it kind of gives you a little blurb about what's covered. So in thinking about designing services and things like that, again, this is kind of what it covers. Let's look at some examples. So, how we use our personal things, our mobile phones, our tablets, our personal computers. And so, ideally, if we're supposed to use it for company stuff, the company should provide it. Well, let's talk about realistically, that doesn't happen. So we need to think about how we protect that stuff. So if I've got family who can have access to my phone, but I'm also using it for work, how do I make sure that information is kept private? If we're providing clients with our personal mobile phone number, I mean, how do we maintain boundaries? And I think there's some liability there, because what if I decide not to answer the call and there's something major going on? So I think we need to be really careful with, yes, it's convenient, but is it a good idea? Online testimonials, things like that, we shouldn't solicit it where people are talking about how great our services are and things like that. But what about if a client offers? What if they want to do it? How is that different, or is it different? I think we still want to be careful, because, it'd be easy to say, well, the client offered, I didn't ask them, so there's no harm, no foul. But, maybe there is, because maybe a client does an online testimonial for you and a future employer sees it, now won't hire them because of what they perceive they got from your agency. So I just think we need to be very cautious, and we need to be in the position of protecting our clients. But also talking to them, I mean, again, it's their perfect right to do reviews on health grades or whatever. But again, for them to understand that makes them identifiable. That when we do supervision consultation, that what are we doing to protect confidentiality? First of all, we need to be using, with any technology, HIPAA compliant sites and things like that. One of the things I'm doing for my clinical supervision is I have a Zoom meeting room specifically for supervision, and it is password protected, so that the person has to enter the password every time. When that person finishes, I'm going to change the password when I take on a new person. So that's just trying to be protective of the information that we're sharing, because in clinical supervision, that you're talking about cases and client information, things like that. So again, more sections, and I would really encourage you to really take a look at these areas, because it is a very, very interesting and very helpful piece of information. So the third section is, again, how information is gathered and stored. We need to talk to clients about how, what they're going to use, and how we're going to use technology and how we're going to store things. That goes back to things like, even like email. If they're going to send us something by email, who has access to that, and what happens to it after it comes in on email? they need to understand again that that information, I mean, certainly in the old days of only paper records, somebody could take a record, they could. But with electronic stuff, there's people out there again who are very tech savvy who can retrieve that information. So we talk about again the risks. Somebody hacks the system or uses phishing emails, things like that. Um, things can be misplaced. So we're thinking about if I'm, if I have my phone and that's what I'm using to do contacts with clients, what happens if I can't, I put it somewhere and can't find it? Also, information can be, electronic stuff can be subpoenaed. So, um, but also something I didn't really think about is, think about when it's time to upgrade to a new phone. What do you do with the old phone? How do you make sure it's been totally cleared to where nobody can see the information that might be on it? Um, Same thing with going and getting new laptops or tablets and things like that. We have to be very careful about, is the information being erased from that device? Um, you know, so again, government law enforcement can potentially gain access. And sometimes stuff is sent to the wrong person. Again, it happens. Text messages, emails, any of that can happen. Um, so again, we need to really take, and you're going to see this a lot, and you see it in ethics too, reasonable steps. Because things can happen, but did you do what any social worker would do in that situation? So when we think about before, again, sharing information, the same thing applies. Just because it's electronic does not mean that the rules change. We still have to have release of information. We still have to be very careful about who's getting the information that we have. So when you think about, when we're going to send something by email, verify the email and or fax number or whatever, and tell that person, call them and say, I'm going to send this. Please let me know immediately that you got it or didn't. With your own company, you're going to have to do this, but using servers that are encrypted. But when you talk about for companies, that's kind of on them to do. Limiting the information sent, only what's necessary. And again, ensuring that the recipient will, again, maintain confidentiality and not share it with people they're not supposed to. For example, if I ask for information from an agency and my client wants to see it or me to share that, that's not mine to share. Whoever wants it needs to go back to the original agency and get that information. There's also examples of email policy statement, how to do that, because again, everyone's different. One agency I worked with, we weren't allowed to have private emails because for fear that a client could leave a message and maybe it's not seen till Monday. There was a company email that the administrative people dealt with, and then they could forward the information to us if they needed to do it. So I get that. But at the same time, if a client sent something, anybody could open it. And so I had a conversation with a client, and they didn't say anything bad or inappropriate. But I said, you need to understand that when you send this to this email, anybody in this office can see it. It doesn't just come to me. And so they now knew that. Client access to their own records. That again, clients generally can have access to the records, but there is stipulations for behavioral health records. You don't have to turn them right over. And so we have to think about, I know with some EMR, electronic medical record systems, you can log on and see your patient information. You can see your visits and things like that. So we might want to consider what that looks like for our clients. Can they log on and see the therapy notes that you're doing? And should that be that way? Again, they can be hacked. Somebody, even if they're not hacked, the client gets in and they let somebody else look at their records, and we don't know how that other person's going to use that information. If somebody is in a fragile state, seeing information may not be in their best interest. And again, we may not want them to have therapy notes, testing data, evaluations. Now, we can provide them with summaries and things like that, but we may not want the full thing out there. Again, gathering, storing, that we shouldn't gather information we don't need. So, this is where we talk about, and this is where the Code of Ethics talks about electronic searches. You shouldn't do it unless it's an absolute really, really good reason. So I have a client come in and I just want to know more about them. So I start creeping on their stuff. That's not professionally needed. If I had a client, let's say I had a teenager that was on my caseload and they ran away, and there's safety issues, trying to find them through their social media could be something I might justify. So just be cautious, because we leave footprints when we look. And here again, we see the exception to that. Emergency situations. Again, when we talk about accessing client records remotely, that's a wonderful thing to be able to do. But at the same time, it comes with risks. So, let's say I'm at home and I log into my work unit and I've got the client's file there. I need to make sure that one, my stuff is password protected, but also I don't leave that information up on my screen, that I shut it down. When we're talking about portable devices, tablets and phones and laptops, is again, what happens if that thing if it gets stolen or misplaced? What's the risk to clients? And then the last one is education and supervision. So, we all know again about ethical decision making. There's several ones out there. This is one go-to for me, is just the ethical steps for problem solving, and it's kind of laid out where, here's the steps. Something else that's really handy to use is the ethical principles screen, because what it does is it kind of helps us. There's so many times that you're going to have something happen and you're going to say, oh my gosh, there's several issues here. What's important? Protection life is always important. So that takes precedence over anything. So if a client's telling me that, let's say I have a kid in my office and they're telling me they're getting abused at home, should I be honest and telling the family I've got to make a CPS report? Yeah. But if I think that kid can be in danger, then no, I don't have to do that, because protecting their life outweighs the truthfulness and full disclosure. And it also outweighs privacy and confidentiality. Here are the steps explained a little bit better. They kind of give you some descriptions. So what I would like to do here is really just open up, and I'll be joining you live. And let's talk about just things you guys are running into and questions you might have. And then, we got sources as well. Again, thank you for listening to the presentation, and let's proceed with the few minutes we have left to just have a discussion about use of technology and the things that we're encountering.
Hey guys, this is Robin. Sorry, the internet kicked me out, so I had to log back in with my phone.
But you're back.
Yeah, it's really ugly for some reason.
So I saw where there were a few questions. Robin, how would you like to handle this?
Okay, let me see if I can access them from the phone. Okay, well, I can't get to the chat box.
There was a lot that you were going through with, was it Brenda, that her Facebook got hacked? And I don't know that you ever, was it Judy?
So it was me, and I put the question out there, and that it appears that multiple people have this problem. So perhaps we could use just a little guidance. So very recently, someone hacked my account, my Facebook account, changed the email address. So all the recovery information is going to the hacker. They now have control of my account. I don't know what they're posting on my account. It is still up. I can't see it because of privacy settings. Judy said she had the same problem. She knew other people that have had the problem. It appears they shut her account down. I can only hope they shut mine down, but in the meantime, I don't know how they're presenting me.
Mm-hmm.
It's concerning.
Yeah, it is concerning. And we get so limited because we're talking about these huge companies. The other thing, I think I was in the process of typing when my internet decided to get stupid, it might be worth contacting the state attorney general and see if they have any guidelines, or even if it's been several people, to maybe I don't know if they would consider contacting Facebook as well, because that's a problem. Absolutely, it's not good that it's personal accounts, but again, like you said, it represents, even though it's your personal account, it's still your professional self out there.
Right. And that's what I told them in a message. I said, I am a social worker. This can impact my career. I need a response from someone. Please help me. And I just got to where I started screenshotting the messages to them because they're not responding. How am I going to protect myself?
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe the Attorney General to bring attention to the problem on professionals.
Possibly. I don't know if folks are a member of NASW. Maybe there might be some legal. I mean, they don't give you legal advice, but there might be some guidelines there, or for folks with your malpractice insurance carrier, to talk to them and say, again, guidance here, because we're talking about some legal issues. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, this could impact my livelihood.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea what they're doing. Facebook obviously doesn't care.
Right.
They don't care. If I can regain control, I will never have another Facebook account. I've never been so concerned about my career in my life.
Yeah, and that's a shame. It is a shame.
Yeah, and I had such a limited, I mean, I was very restrictive of who I even let on my account for the same reasons, but I never imagined this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's a question from Sydney Hopkins. I'd like to know more about communicating with clients via text message. She found that be helpful in keeping up with their client suggestions.
Well, again, I mean, it's all about being cautious, because remember what I said earlier about, this stuff, it technically is part of the record. It's a communication. So if something is subpoenaed, how do you provide that? The other things like privacy issues, who has access to your phone to read those? Are you sure who has access on their end and is reading your text messages? So and I know I'm an old fogey and I'm okay with that, but I think it blurs lines really easily.
And then Tammy Rizzio, a question about best way to handle confidential HIPAA protected information sent to us. She was recently instructed someone who had received that type of info to gather what was needed and delete it. Was that right? Do you want to explain, Tammy? You want to come on?
Yeah, please.
Sure. So someone had sent confidential information to one of the clinicians here within our agency, and she's like, what do I do with this? And I told her, delete it. They sent the information, but you don't want to be in possession of it. It was not sent encrypted. It was just sent through a regular email.
Yeah, I mean, you can, I guess, I'm not giving legal advice here, but the other thing I think I would do is I would have gotten in touch with whoever that was and said, you realize that you sent information to us that was not intended for us.
It was intended for us. It just was.
Oh.
Yes, it was intended for the clinician. What we run into sometimes with some other folks that we work with on treatment teams is that we are held to a higher standard than they are. So probation officers, attorneys, I would think that attorneys would be held to that, but maybe they are, maybe they aren't, I don't know. So it just seems like sensitive. Maybe it's not HIPAA protected, but it's sensitive information that is sometimes sent to our clinicians and it's not encrypted. So I've just instructed them, gather the information you need and delete it.
Comment, Robin? Or are you frozen, Robin?
We lost her again.
I think we might have lost her for a second.
I think she has moved on to the ether realm or ether realm. Let's see here. Yeah, she may drop back in here in a moment, I hope.
Okay.
And she may be.
Let's just hold for a second, everybody. We just got technical difficulties. She'll be back in a moment.
And another reason why we need to push for more broadband in this wonderful
Yes.
state. Absolutely.
Yeah, there we go. We got a lobbying
Yeah.
issue here.
Yes.
So,
Hmm.
as soon as I see her, I will let her in. And then some folks had some questions that I will give to her about traveling between states when you're on vacation, and what are the rules, and what do you need to do if you're going to be across state lines. But I don't see her. Did she text you, Brian?
No, sir, not yet. And I think she was suffering from some bad internet, I believe, or something along those lines. So I have not reached her or heard from her.
Yep. See whether or not I can reach her.
Yeah, I'm sure this is making her crazy, not being able to get on there, and she has so many things. We keep a copy of everything that's in the text, by the way, and you all can do that as well. If you click on the three dots beside the text or in the text box, and there's an option to save your text. But we also keep them, and Sam goes back through and
Joe,
looks to
Joe,
put on
Brian,
stuff.
this is Terry. Robin cannot get back in. I'm talking to her on the phone.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
okay. You could put her on speakerphone.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
can
I'm
you
about
put
to
her
put
on
you on
speakerphone?
speakerphone, okay? All right, she's here.
Sometimes it just takes crazy.
Can you hear us, Robin?
Yes, I can. So I guess, yeah. And here's the problem with technology.
Okay. Well, there was a question about interstate. You left off with the Facebook thing. Do you want to elaborate on that and then move over to people that are like on border states and or going on vacation?
Okay. Yeah, the biggest thing with the vacation, right now it's just basically, with technology, it's considered where you're practicing and where the client is. And so it's really kind of icky with, going on vacation, because if I go to Florida, well, technically I'm practicing in Florida. So, what you can do, and particularly, I tried to answer this in the chat and got cut off, but if I go somewhere a lot, then you know what, get in touch with that state and see if they will grant you privileges to see your clients back in West Virginia when you're in their territory. Because it is a jurisdiction issue. West Virginia is facing this as well. If somebody wants to provide services to clients in West Virginia, they either have to have a West Virginia license or permission from West Virginia to do that. So I think it's better safe than sorry.
Yeah. So Kevin Mara has an interesting question. Says, can you address the disclaimer aspect when someone adds that to the end of an email, how that doesn't exclude you from breaching confidentiality? He's curious about how that even came about.
Yeah, I think it wasn't, and I don't know the legal part of it. I think it was an attempt to say, hey, if you don't get this, please don't read it. But one of the things, and I had the privilege of sitting in, and some of you will know, Joe, you'll know, Frederick Reamer several years ago at the Fishboard Conference. And one of the things he recommended was when you send a fax, call immediately to that person and make sure they can get it and they have it. Things like verifying fax numbers to make sure that we're sending it to the correct place to begin with. Because the disclaimer does, I mean, it's like, you know, okay, now it's there, and maybe an ethical person would shred it, but you might have somebody else say, ooh, let me look at this. Oh my goodness, I know this person. So it's meant to be protective, but I don't know how protective that is.
Does somebody have another question that they just want to unmute yourself and ask it real quick? Because we got about 2 minutes. Okay, here's one. What about social workers? Oh my God. Is there a temporary license for telehealth if you spend several months in another state to provide services? I'm not sure if I'm asking this clearly. That's Paula Reimer. I don't know. That's state by state, wouldn't you say, Robin?
Yeah, every state's going to be different from the beginning to say that, yes, I'm credentialed to provide telehealth or just permission. I'm not sure where that question is.
Well, then she wants to know about the opposite. What about Billy Joe Bishop wants to know, like, what about if you are in West Virginia and your client goes somewhere out of state, can you still service them by telehealth?
See, and that's still, I would say no. And see, what I'm getting ready to say right now, I've got a client who's visiting family for a month and a half in Pennsylvania. And so what I told him I would do is I'll contact Pennsylvania to see if they have if this client needs me, can I provide services? But I'm not going to do it unless Pennsylvania tells me yes. It's not. Now, people might say, well, gosh, how would Pennsylvania know? Well, it's about us practitioners. So I think it's better to ask, get that permission. If they say, okay, we'll credential you, we'll allow you to see your client while they're here, and then, you know, the problem solved. Our on-campus counselor did that, and it was a fairly easy process. She had to just fax her to that board, and I think it was like New Jersey where she was seeing a client, or going to see a client, and they verified it, and they gave her permission to see her client while they were on break from college.
Okay. I think we're right at our time, but anybody got a quick question? Unmute yourself and ask away. I think we've covered about all that we can. I'm sorry. I think we're good.
Thank you all for putting up with our technical
Thanks, Robin.
difficulties and glitches, and I believe we made it all the way through. And thank you for holding the phone up to the.
Thank you, Terry, and
that worked out.
Robin. All right, you all have a good rest of your day. The next thing is 5:30 sessions coming up. So, and then I think there's a brief interaction with the networking room at 4:45 to 5:15, if anybody wants to participate in that. Thank you.
Joe, thank you for reading those questions too, and thank you for emceeing the whole thing.
Sure enough, Kevin. Thank you. We have to adapt sometimes with this Zoom.
So what we do.
Yeah, that's what we do. That was good that she was
social
able to call Terry. I like that one.